President Trump wants to see if somebody stole $400 billion of Fort Knox gold. What you should know. Hi everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome back to your financial journey. So Fort Knox is one of the most secure and secretive locations in the United States. Inside, there are over 147 million ounces, or 4,600 tons of gold, worth more than $400 billion. But is it really there? Or has it been secretly moved, sold, or even replaced with fake bars? And why does the US store so much gold in Fort Knox in the first place? And how do these gold reserves compare to other nations? As you can see from these questions, today we're going to dive deep into the truth about US gold reserves. To understand why Fort Knox exists, we have to go back to the Great Depression, a time of economic collapse, bank failures, and mass unemployment. In the early 1930s, the financial system was in freefall. People didn't trust banks anymore, so they started hoarding gold at home instead of depositing their money in a bank. This led to massive cash shortages for banks, which made the economy even worse. The government needed to take drastic action. So in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, which made it illegal for private citizens to own gold. That's right, if you owned gold coins or gold certificates, you were required to sell them to the government for $20.67 per ounce. The idea was to get the gold back into the banking system so that the Federal Reserve could expand the money supply and get the economy moving again. But this created a new problem. Now that the US Treasury had confiscated hundreds of thousands of millions of ounces of gold, it needed a secure place to store it. So in 1936, the government built Fort Knox Bullion Deposit in Kentucky. It was designed to be the most secure vault in the world, and by the early 1940s, Fort Knox held over 650 million ounces of gold. That was 70% of all the gold in the world at the time. Now let's talk about security. Fort Knox is not just your average bank vault, it's one of the most heavily fortified locations on the planet. First, it's surrounded by multiple layers of fencing, motion detectors, and even rumored landmines. The U.S. Mint Police, one of the oldest law enforcement agencies in America, guards the facility 24/7. But beyond that, the entire Fort Knox military base is nearby, with over 30,000 soldiers ready to defend it if necessary. Then there's the vault itself. The main door weighs 24 tons and is made of hardened steel and concrete, designed to withstand direct attacks, explosives, and even nuclear blasts. But here's the most interesting part. No single person knows the full combination to open the vault. The code is split among multiple officials, and they each only know their own portion. That means that even if the President of the United States wanted to, they couldn't just walk in and demand to see the gold. In fact, Franklin D. Roosevelt was the last president to go inside and see the gold reserves on April 28, 1943. But does Fort Knox really contain all the gold that the U.S. Treasury claims it does? All the 147.3 million ounces, which are worth over $400 billion at today's prices? And that's where things get suspicious for some observers. There hasn't been a full independent audit of Fort Knox since President Eisenhower authorized one in 1953, 72 years ago. In 1974, a small group of journalists and politicians were given a quick look inside, but they weren't allowed to weigh, inspect, or count the gold properly. Since then, no independent third party has been allowed inside to verify that the gold is actually there. That has led many people to question if Fort Knox is really full of gold or if it's just empty. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is that Fort Knox isn't the only place where the US keeps its gold. In fact, more than half of America's gold reserves are stored somewhere else, including in the West Point Mint in New York, the Denver Mint in Colorado, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Now, the New York Fed is particularly interesting because it also holds gold from other countries. In total, the vault under the Federal Reserve Bank of New York holds over 200 million ounces of gold, making it one of the largest gold storage sites in the world and even larger than Fort Knox overall, even though not all of this gold belongs to the US, as I just explained. So how does the amount of gold that the US actually owns compare to other countries? Here are the nations with the largest gold reserves today. First, the United States has 8,133 metric tons of gold reserves. In second place is Germany with 3,355 metric tons. Third, Italy with 2,452 tons, and then France with 2,437 tons of gold. Finally, Russia stands at fifth with 2,298 metric tons of gold reserves, and China is just below that with 2,113 metric tons. Interestingly, both China and Russia have been aggressively increasing their gold reserves over the past 2 decades. Some experts believe that China actually has far more gold than it officially reports, as it has been quietly purchasing gold without disclosing exact numbers. Now let's talk a bit more about the conspiracy theories surrounding Fort Knox. Some people believe that the gold was secretly sold off decades ago and that the vault is actually empty. Others suggest that even if there is gold inside, it may be fake. Specifically, gold-plated tungsten bars. Tungsten has almost the same density as gold, which makes it incredibly difficult to detect fakes without drilling into the bars. And if you want to be 100% certain that there was no foul play, you'd have to melt down every single gold bar to make sure it's made entirely of gold and nothing but gold. Of course, this makes a full audit of our gold reserves very expensive and very time-consuming. And that's probably the reason why the Treasury says that it conducts regular audits of our gold reserves, but only on a partial basis, on a few samples, so to speak, in order not to have to drill holes or even melt down every single bar of gold in the vault. That said, it's not that there are no fake gold bars out there. In fact, back in 2009, there were reports that some international gold bars were found to be fake, containing tungsten cores instead of pure gold. This added fuel to the speculation that Fort Knox could be filled with fake gold bars too. There's also the theory that the US quietly moved much of its gold overseas in secret transactions, either to back international deals or to stabilize global markets. Without a full independent audit, there's no way to know for sure. In recent developments, President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, head of the Department of Government Efficiency, have expressed interest in verifying the contents of Fort Knox. Trump announced plans to personally visit the facility, stating, "We're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure that the gold is still there. If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset." Musk echoed this sentiment, suggesting a live video walkthrough of the vaults to confirm its contents. These statements have reignited public interest and speculation regarding the US gold reserves. So, why does the US, or any country, still keep gold reserves in the first place? After all, we're no longer on the gold standard, meaning that the US dollar isn't directly backed by gold anymore. Now, the reason is that gold still plays a huge role in global finance, and there are 3 main reasons why nations continue to hold on to it. First, gold is a store of value that doesn't lose its worth over time. Unlike paper money, which can be printed endlessly, gold is scarce and historically stable. This makes it a safe haven asset during times of economic crisis. When stock markets crash, national debts spiral out of control, or inflation devalues paper currencies, but gold remains a reliable fallback. Second, gold is used to back confidence in a country's currency. Even though the US dollar isn't directly tied to gold, having gold reserves reassures investors in foreign nations that the US has real assets behind its economy. This is why many central banks still buy gold today, despite shifting to fiat currencies decades ago. Third, gold is a political and economic tool that countries use in trade agreements, international transactions, and as a last resort in case of financial collapse. For example, during the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union both stockpiled gold as a part of their economic strategies. Today, countries like China and Russia are increasing their gold reserves to reduce dependence on the US dollar and to strengthen their global influence. But back to our question. Is there really as much gold in Fort Knox as we're being told? The US government insists that the gold is there, but as we said before, without a full independent audit, there's no way to prove it 100%. The fact that no independent outsider has seen and audited all the gold in over 70 years is what keeps the mystery alive. If it were ever revealed that Fort Knox doesn't have as much gold as the government claims, the consequences could be massive. It could shake confidence in the US dollar, spark a global financial panic, and raise questions about how much gold there actually is in other central banks around the world. So, what do you think? Is Fort Knox still full of gold, or has it all been replaced with fake bars or even been sold off over the decades? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss more finance and history breakdowns. You might also want to check out this video here on President Trump getting rid of the penny. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.